Hi, I'm Lior, and I will talk about out-of-band authenticated group key exchange from strong authentication to immediate key delivery. This is joint work with Moni Naor and with Gil Segev. The basic task that we will be interested in this talk is that of generating shared secrets among users. This is a very fundamental task in cryptography, and when authenticated channels among the users are available, we have a host of key exchange protocols for achieving this task, while protecting against eavesdropping adversaries. But oftentimes, authenticated channels are unavailable to the users. In this case, we have to protect against active man-in-the-middle attackers. Such attackers may change the messages sent by the users with messages of their own choice. It is not hard to see that man-in-the-middle attacks are impossible to detect in the absence of additional assumptions. Indeed, a common assumption which enables users to detect man-in-the-middle attacks is that of a trusted public key infrastructure. However, this assumption is not suitable for all scenarios. Consider, for example, the case of ad-hoc networks, such as the ones formed in messaging platforms and by connections among IoT devices. In these settings, connections are made spontaneously and in an unpredictable manner, and moreover, these networks include numerous devices which are being replaced constantly. All of this makes it unrealistic to maintain a trusted public key infrastructure in these settings. Fortunately, what is realistic to assume, and what is indeed often assumed in these scenarios, is that users have the ability to so-called out-of-band authenticate one short value. For example, in the context of messaging platforms, this can be achieved by having the users compare one short value that is displayed on both of their devices. Indeed, the example on the slide is from the WhatsApp messaging application, and the supposed guarantee is that if the same value is displayed on both devices, then with high probability no man-in-the-middle attack has occurred. More generally, we can model this kind of authentication by a low bandwidth out-of-band channel, over which one user can authenticate one short L bit value to the other user. The channel is low bandwidth because users will be willing to compare only reasonably short strings. There are other implementations to this out-of-band channel, but in many of them, there is this inherent trade-off between minimizing the user's effort and providing ample security to the users. So we are typically interested in protocols which provide the best possible such trade-off. So let us see an example for a non-interactive out-of-band key exchange protocol. By non-interactive, we mean that each user sends one message over the regular insecure channel independently of the other user's messages, and then one user sends a short value over the out-of-band channel, and this value may depend on previous messages. So here we have Alice, Bob, and the man in the middle, and the idea is that Alice and Bob run the Diffie-Hellman key exchange protocol, and then Alice sends a hash of her view over the out-of-band channel. Bob then verifies that this hash is consistent with his view of the execution, and if that is the case, then the users set their keys as in the Diffie-Hellman protocol. On the other hand, if the out-of-band value is inconsistent with Bob's view of the execution, then the users have detected the man-in-the-middle attack. What is good about this protocol, and about non-interactive protocols in general, is that they do not require any two users to be online at any particular point in time. This is why non-interactive protocols are widely used by messaging platforms, and the protocol that we just saw is a simplified version of the protocol used by Signal and WhatsApp. The downside of this protocol, however, is that an attacker which can compute roughly t evaluations of the hash function can break the protocol with probability roughly t times 2 to the minus L. Concretely, after observing g to the a and g to the b, the attacker can randomly sample t pairs a hat and b hat until she finds values which result in views for Alice and Bob that collide under the hash function. This is crucial whenever L is small, and as we said, this is the typical case since the value of L is typically tied to the amount of effort that the users have to put in. More generally speaking, it is not hard to see that this downside is shared by any non-interactive protocol by a simple generalization of the attack that we just described. Given this downside of non-interactive protocols, in this talk we will be interested in interactive protocols. Such protocols, unlike their non-interactive counterparts, can provide security guarantees which are essentially independent of the attacker's concrete running time. Thanks to this advantage, interactive user-to-user protocols have been in deployment for a while now, for example in the PGP phone protocol, in the Bluetooth protocol, and in the protocol used by Telegram to secure its voice calls. These protocols have been formally studied by Bassini and Vaudenet and by Lindell. In the group setting, however, there are no interactive protocols in deployment. Moreover, the problem has only been partially studied in a previous paper by Gil Segev and myself from Crypto 18, hereinafter RS 18. Concretely, we suggested an interactive group protocol with a short out-of-band value, but as we will discuss later on, this protocol is a message authentication protocol, and as such, it satisfies natural security properties in that context. However, as it turns out, given our goals in this work, when used as a building block for designing a key exchange protocol, there are additional, less obvious properties that it does not satisfy. This will become more clear in a couple of slides when we describe our approach. In light of this situation, the focus of this talk is that of interactive out-of-band group key exchange protocols. A main challenge that arises in particular in the interactive group setting is that some users may not complete the execution of the protocol, for example, due to connectivity issues. Even in such scenarios, we will still want to ensure that users who do complete the protocol do agree on a shared secret key. We call this property immediate key delivery. Our contributions are the following. First, we put forth a framework for analyzing out-of-band authenticated group key exchange protocols, and our definitions capture both crucial security notions as well as the important property of immediate key delivery. On the negative end, we show that existing protocols that have short out-of-band values do not satisfy the requirements that we present. On the positive end, based on any passively secure key exchange protocol, we construct an out-of-band authenticated group key exchange protocol which provides both immediate key delivery and the optimal security guarantees as a function of the length of the out-of-band value. The rest of this talk will proceed as follows. First, we will discuss our framework for out-of-band group key exchange protocols. Then, we will talk about existing protocols and why they do not satisfy our definitions. We will then move on to present our optimally secure out-of-band group key exchange protocol with immediate key delivery. And finally, we will end with some concluding remarks. So let's begin by presenting our framework. We start by describing the communication model. Following RS18, we assume users communicate over two types of channels, an insecure channel and the out-of-band channel. The man in the middle can read, remove, and insert new messages to the insecure channel. The out-of-band channel is a broadcast channel, over which one designated user can authenticate a short message to the entire group. The channel is authenticated but not secret. Concretely, the adversary can read, remove, or delay messages sent by the designated user on this channel, but cannot modify messages or insert new messages to this channel in an undetectable manner. Within this communication model, we defined three requirements that an out-of-band authenticated group key exchange protocol should satisfy. The first is pseudo-randomness of the shared key. As standard for key exchange protocols, we require that for a passive attacker, the key shared by the users at the end of the protocol should be indistinguishable from a uniformly sampled key in the key space. Since the out-of-band channel is not secret, this should hold even if the attacker sees the out-of-band value. The second requirement that we already mentioned is adversary-independent man-in-the-middle detection. Informally, it means that an efficient active attacker goes undetected with probability at most epsilon plus some negligible function of the security parameter, where this negligible function may depend on the attacker, but epsilon is fixed for all efficient attackers. The third requirement is immediate key delivery, which, as we said, states that if some of the users do not complete the protocol, the remaining users should still agree on a shared key. Of course, this key should look random for a passive attacker. So these are the requirements that an out-of-band group key exchange protocol should satisfy, and the main challenge is satisfying all of them simultaneously. Intuitively, the reason why this is a challenge is that an honest user cannot tell the difference between another honest user losing connectivity and adversarial interference blocking messages from this user. This naturally gives the attacker considerable additional power that we have to address when designing our protocols. Let's move on to discuss why existing protocols do not satisfy these requirements. We already mentioned why non-interactive protocols do not provide adversary-independent man-in-the-middle detection, so we restrict our attention to interactive protocols. The only interactive group protocol is the protocol introduced in the RS18 paper. This protocol is based on the so-called transcript authentication paradigm. Loosely speaking, in the first stage, the users run any passively secure key exchange protocol, and then in the second stage, they authenticate the transcript of the first stage using some group out-of-band authentication protocol. So what is a group out-of-band authentication protocol? Roughly speaking, this is a protocol which allows a user in a group to use the out-of-band channel in order to authenticate a long message to the entire group. A bit more formally, we have a sending user with some input message M, which is the message to be authenticated, and this user runs some group out-of-band authentication protocol with k additional users or receivers. At the end of this protocol, each of the receivers outputs a message m hat I, where I ranges from 1 to k. The correctness requirement is that in a non-stack execution, all receivers output the correct message m, and security or unforgeability requires that for any efficient attacker, the probability that some user outputs a fraudulent message is bounded by epsilon plus some negligible function of the security parameter, where epsilon is fixed for all attackers. These were the two requirements considered in RS18, and the main contribution of RS18 was to construct a group out-of-band authentication protocol with an optimally low value of the forgery probability epsilon. In this work, we consider a third requirement, which we call immediate message delivery. According to this requirement, even if some of the users do not complete the protocol, the remaining users should still output the correct message M. In this terminology, the group out-of-band authentication protocol of RS18 does not provide immediate message delivery. Hence, when this protocol is used within the transcript authentication paradigm, the resulting out-of-band group key exchange protocol does not provide immediate key delivery. So what we want is to construct a group out-of-band authentication protocol which does provide immediate message delivery, while still keeping the forgery probability optimally low. Consider the following naive attempt for compiling any group out-of-band authentication protocol, such as the one from RS18, into one that provides immediate message delivery. Start running the protocol, and if any of the users aborts, start over with the remaining users. Assuming that the original protocol is well defined for any number of receivers, this compiler indeed yields a group out-of-band authentication protocol with immediate message delivery. Alas, there is a caveat. The caveat is that now, if the number of receivers is k, an attacker has k attempts to break the original protocol. Hence, since the forgery probability in every instance of the RS18 protocol is k times 2 to the minus L, the overall forgery probability is k squared times 2 to the minus L. More generally, RS18 gave a lower bound of k times 2 to the minus L for any group out-of-band authentication protocol, so we cannot hope to do better using this simple player elimination technique. Note that there is a gap of factor k between the forgery probability of k squared times 2 to the minus L and the lower bound of RS18. This is a very significant gap, especially for large values of k. Recall that the value of L is inherently tied to the amount of effort that the users put in, and this is not a value that we can easily increase. So what we want is to keep the forgery probability small for large values of k without increasing the value of L. So the question that naturally arises is which of the two bounds is tight, or in other words, can we do better than a forgery probability of k squared times 2 to the minus L? So this is where our protocol comes into the picture, and as we will see, it matches the lower bound from RS18. As a starting point, let us review the out-of-band authentication protocol of RS18. We have a sender S with an input message M and k receivers R1 through Rk. At the beginning of the protocol, S sends M over the insecure channel, samples a random L bit value Rs, and commits to the concatenation of M and Rs. Then, each Ri samples a random L bit value little ri and commits to it. Once all commitments are done, all of the receivers decommit to reveal the random values, and then S decommits to reveal Rs. Finally, the out-of-band value is the XOR of Rs and R1 through Rk, and each receiver outputs the message M that she received at the beginning of the protocol, if and only if the out-of-band value is consistent with her view of the execution. As we mentioned, this protocol does not provide immediate message delivery. If any of the receivers fails to decommit, then the rest of the receivers interpret this failure as an active attack and do not output any message. In the paper, we show that this is not a technicality and that simple attempts to add immediate message delivery to this protocol do not work. You can find more details in the paper. Before we turn to see our new protocol, let us consider an alternative view of the RS18 protocol. According to this view, after S commits to M and RS, the receivers run some sub-protocol in order to collectively sample a random L-bit string, RR. Namely, in the RS18 protocol, the value RR corresponds to the XOR of little r1 through little rk. Then, S decommits, and the out-of-band value is the XOR of RS and RR. Now, an important observation that we make is that the string sampling protocol used to sample RR in RS18 is very unfair in the sense that the output string of the protocol can be easily directed to specific values by adversarial aborts. So the idea in our protocol is to follow this template from RS18 while using techniques from the realm of fair coin flipping protocols in order to counter the influence of adversarial aborts. We can now present our optimally secure group out-of-band authentication protocol with immediate message delivery. The protocol is parameterized by an additional parameter t, which will roughly correspond to the round complexity of the protocol. The difference between this new protocol and the RS18 protocol is in the way in which the receivers collectively sample the L-bit value RR. So the way that they do it is as follows. They proceed in T rounds, where in each round, each receiver samples a random L-bit value little ri and commits to it, and once all receivers have committed to their values, they decommit. The value of round j, denoted by sigma j, is said to be the XOR of the values that were revealed by the receiver in this round. In particular, if any of the receivers fails to decommit, we simply replace the corresponding little ri with the all-zero string and eliminate this receiver from future rounds. Finally, the string RR collectively sampled by the receivers is said to be the bitwise majority over sigma 1 through sigma t. As before, the out-of-band value is the XOR of RS and this RR, and each of the receivers output the message M that she received at the beginning of the protocol, if and only if this out-of-band value is consistent with her view of the execution. So here we have a theorem which establishes the security of our protocol, and the theorem states that if the underlying commitment scheme being used is statistically binding and concurrent non-malleable, then for any number k of receivers and for any length L of the out-of-band value, the epsilon of our protocol is k times 1/2 plus O of k over square root of t raised to the power of L. In other words, for any efficient attacker, the forgery probability is bounded by this epsilon plus some negligible function of the security parameter. As an immediate corollary, if we set t to be asymptotically greater than k squared, then we get that the forgery probability in our protocol essentially matches the lower bound from RS18 up to lower order terms. I won't have the time to go over the proof, but just to give some intuition as to how the proof works, we can consider an ideal experiment in which the values in the commitments are chosen at random only at the time of the decommitment. In this ideal experiment, even an unbounded attacker cannot make a receiver output a fraudulent message with probability larger than this epsilon due to properties of the binomial distribution. The actual proof does not rely on ideal commitments and is more technically involved, and you can see the paper for details. Okay, so let's conclude. We presented a new framework for analyzing out-of-band authenticated group key exchange protocols, and at the heart of this framework is the new and important requirement of immediate key delivery. Satisfying this requirement poses a unique challenge in the interactive group setting. Within this framework, we presented an optimal out-of-band authenticated group key exchange protocol with immediate key delivery. To that end, we relied on techniques used in fair coin flipping protocols, and an interesting open question is to what extent is this relation inherent? Concretely, does any coin flipping protocol yield a corresponding out-of-band key exchange protocol? Conversely, we can ask if any out-of-band group key exchange protocol with immediate key delivery gives rise to a coin flipping protocol with related security guarantees. Thanks to lower bounds in the coin flipping literature, this can give insights as to the round complexity of immediate key delivery. So with that, I will conclude my talk, and thank you for listening.